Welcome to Things Go Sideways. I'm KiKi L'Italian. This is the show where we talk about what happens when the plan breaks, when the coping strategy stops working, or the thing that once kept you going and you thought was all smooth sailing becomes the thing that you can't carry anymore, right? Today's conversation is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time. My guest is Brian Kirkland. He is an experienced association leader, innovation strategist, and someone who has been thoughtful and honest about sobriety, trauma, neurodivergence, and what it means to lead without numbing yourself through the work. Brian's shared openly about, and I love this about him, about the period of his life when alcohol functioned as a kind of security blanket, and what happened when that blanket was gone. After hitting a wall, being diagnosed with PTSD, and later discovering a new understanding of his brain through ADHD and autism diagnoses, he's learned so much more about himself. This isn't a story about fixing yourself. This is something that is about finding your truth and living differently because of it. And so with that, Brian, I am glad that you're here.
I'm glad to be here. Finally, I'm on a KiKi L'Italian podcast. This is so exciting.
It's super exciting. And, I've known you for so long, and I guess I could call it in the before times because we're going to be talking about a lot of things, your journey and everything. But I've always adored you. I've always thought that you were someone who, whenever I talked with you or met with you, you had creative things to say. You always had a light on in your eyes where it was exchanging information with people. And that is something that I've always admired about you. You care so much about others. And what I love is that we're hearing more about how you are caring more for yourself. And so I don't know. This is kind of a weird question. I'm going to start with it anyway. I like weird things. If you
had to bring it.
Yeah. If you had to title this chapter of your life, the one that reshaped how you live and lead, what would you call it? And why that name?
I love this question, by the way, and you're going to bring out my inner music nerd. I would call this chapter of my life Pills and Thrills and Belly Aches.
Oh, wow. That's a really cool name, right? Okay, go ahead. And why?
Yes, and why? So if you don't get the reference, that is the Happy Mondays. It's an album from the famous Manchester band from the late 80s, early 90s. Completely different meaning because they were notorious drug addicts. But in my case, the pills part is really getting in touch with my mental health. And back in 2017, I finally said, I need to start taking some pills to at least feel a little bit better, and specifically antidepressants. And then you have thrills, where really I've discovered so much about myself in the last almost 10 years. And then the belly aches. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, or a lot today. Some of those roadblocks that I hit. And the thing about sobriety is it's not all wine and roses. I shouldn't have said wine, but anyway, it's a really hard road, even after you get past like the mental and the physical aspects of quitting drinking. Mm-hmm. There's all the things that you buried under with years of abuse. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. I mean, since we're already there, let's talk about it. I think that you've described alcohol as being a sort of security blanket. When that security blanket went away, what surprised you the most about what came in to maybe take its place? Were there things that popped up? And I'll share an example. I took 2 years, almost 3 years of when I paused on alcohol. And I was surprised by discovering that things that I hadn't particularly been drawn to before, I found myself in TJ Maxx, and I was like loading up a cart, and it was just sort of randomly. I'm not a big shopper all the time. I know that's maybe a surprise to some people, but I found myself completely loading up a cart of stuff I didn't need.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I doing? And I was almost breaking a sweat. It was really strange. It was a compulsion. And I just abandoned the cart in the middle of the store when I realized, what am I doing? I don't even care. Like, I don't understand what I'm doing here. And it was kind of an odd thing. Did you find anything like that? Did you discover that there was anything that kind of came in to try to replace the alcohol in your life?
Oh, 100%. I mean, for me, I was kind of the stereotypical person in a meeting, just drinking coffee all day long. Shopping too, that was definitely a big one. Sugar, and I think what that pointed to, which I would discover a couple of years down the road, is I was chasing dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, absolutely. That was a big part of it. And I think what really surprised me a lot about sobriety, aside from like me constantly trying to find ways to make myself feel better or to just get a rush out of something, it was for several years, there was a lot of shame around not only obviously the fact that I had drank to excess, I wasted a lot of good years of my life doing so, but also just a lot of shame around how others would perceive me. The stigma of addiction, even though I wasn't physically addicted to alcohol technically, but as soon as someone attaches the word alcoholic to someone, it's like immediately you get the side eyes, or at least the perceived side eyes and the judgments, And fortunately, what I found, and I really want to say this out loud, is that that wasn't true. Like all the perceived stigma and all of the shame that I felt was really self-fabricated. Like whenever I opened up and I finally started being really honest about the fact that I quit drinking and why I quit drinking, the response was amazing, just from friends and colleagues. Some of my friends are bartenders, and even they were like, yeah, let me make you a special mocktail. It was just incredibly supportive, which was probably the biggest thing I wasn't expecting. I felt like I had to just like put that off to the side and not put it on Main Street. But
Yeah.
as soon as I just opened up, it was magnificent and really helped me get through a lot of hard days.
I admire that. I think that it takes a lot of courage to do that because you know that when you make a statement like that, when you go so public, not only is it sort of setting yourself up for people, because one of the great fears of anybody that even takes, I call it like I'm pausing on alcohol, but it's like, I remember when I decided, and this isn't about me, but like, the truth is that out loud, what I said to other people, and let me be clear, I do drink alcohol right now. But at the time when I took a pause, it was right before COVID hit. So when everybody else seemed to amp up their drinking, that's when I spent those years not. It was fascinating because internally I knew I needed to. I knew that that was something that I several times had told myself that I wanted to try that and didn't even want to say it out loud to my husband. And then when I said that I thought I was going to take a break and he didn't seem impressed enough he was like, so what, for like a month? And I'm competitive and I didn't like that he wasn't impressed by that. And so I was like, no longer. And he said 3 months and he still didn't seem impressed enough. And I go, no longer. And he goes, a year. And that's when he really seemed impressed. So that's what I did. I mean, that's the whole reason it set up to be a year in the first place.
Yeah.
And then I decided, I felt so good at the end of it that I decided to go another year. And then we moved. And I found myself going to, meeting new people and parties at their houses and stuff. And I didn't want to seem singled out or different. And there we go. And so I really admired the fact that you have stated very openly and talked about this out loud and on LinkedIn and on your, like, you share this stuff, which I think a lot of people are fearful about. And I know that I'm not even mentioning questions that we talked about before, but how did you get over that fear? Like, how did you decide to go ahead and share? Because that's really hard to do.
I was just tired. I forget exactly when I came out as a sober person, 2021, 22, whatever it was. Really, at that point, I was just very tired.
Mm.
And I think the reason why I felt the need to come out was not only for my own mental health. That's always paramount. That's the number one reason. I just didn't feel like hiding anymore. I felt like I was holding myself back and not being honest. And as you know, I'm a very, very openly honest, for better or worse, person.
Yes.
My mouth does get me in trouble sometimes. But in this case, I was just thinking like it's for me, but it's also for the entire association community.
Mm-hmm.
Our associations are so focused on meetings, conferences, and I know all the temptations that go along with that. As someone who managed ASAE's annual meeting for several years, and you'd go on the site visits and you're just wine and dined by the CVB. And in a lot of cases, that irresponsible behavior was actually rewarded. It got me into rooms with senior leadership. It made me a known quantity in my association because I could hold my liquor and still show up at 6 a.m. the next morning to do the logistics meeting. So with that frame of mind, I know I'm not the only person out there who's dealing with this. And quite frankly, as someone who appears to be a cishet white male, there's not enough of us that are stepping up and doing that. So that was very important for me too, to stigmatize someone that on the surface, you might think I have it all together, or I'm super confident about everything that I do. And that's just not the case. I mean, that's ultimately the goal. If I can help people not necessarily quit, but realize that there are other ways to live, I think that that's mission accomplished.
And that's also a great thing, because it's like you have talked about the fact that, a lot of people, they think about sobriety as bringing this relief and everything. This is like the clarity, the energy, this forward. And there's a lot of that that's out there that's like, hey, this is why you want to do this forward motion. But you've also been honest about the fact that it's incredibly hard. What do you wish someone had told you about what actually comes after you stop numbing?
The biggest thing for me was, and we touched on it a little bit, but the need to replace that bad behavior with something else. That completely blindsided me. Was not expecting that. And I think the other big thing, again, was really just not knowing who I was without the drink in my hand at all times. I had to rediscover how to be Brian, not even how to be, like, who I am, very fundamentally. And it made me question everything leading up to that moment in time. Like, am I actually being authentic? And in a lot of cases with alcohol, no, I was not being authentic. It was, like you said, a security blanket. It was a way for me to fit in, to not feel like the weird kid. I'm obviously not a kid anymore, far from, but a part of me will always feel like the outcast,
Yeah.
So alcohol, like, really, it made me, or at least I thought it made me funny. It made me outgoing. It made me the life of the party, which is so not who I am in real life. So, I mean, I can still rock a karaoke.
But
I can still rock a karaoke stage. But I mean, ultimately, it made me into a version that isn't real. I had to really figure out who I am. And that's the hardest part, because you have so many expectations from people that have been in your life for your entire life or most of your life, that have a perception of you. And you kind of have to have the courage to live against those expectations as you figure out who you are.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the things that you've talked about is that it wasn't just a smooth, like, A, B, C, D, here we are, everything's working perfectly. In the past, you looked at your career, you tried to push forward, you were looking to get your career back on track, and it didn't seem to work. So there was this point where you talk about hitting the wall and how it forced you to finally acknowledge your limits. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Can you talk to me about how that happened, how that came about? What was it that just sort of made you realize, this is it? I need to be honest with myself at this point, because this can't keep going on.
I think a lot of what I experienced was kind of self-inflicted. I'll be perfectly honest with you, at least the career side of things, because, full disclosure, I was a senior director at ASAE whenever I started the process of getting sober. I was, in my mind, on the track that I wanted to be, to eventually work my way up, be chief learning officer, chief executive, whatever the case is. And then I had to stop everything. In 2016, this is all going to tie together, because what I didn't realize at the time, I was like super deep into autistic burnout, which I didn't have a name for at the time, obviously. But I was just looking back in retrospect, thinking about all the things that I was going through. I was totally 100% in burnout. And trying to get sober at the same time. So I did what any person who's going through an existential crisis times a million does. I made a really bad choice and I went to a job that I should not have taken. And it was outside of the association world. To their credit, they didn't do anything wrong. I was just in full on meltdown mode. And after the first month on this job, I realized the gravity of the mistake that I made and just like, oh no, this is bad. And I had to try to get it together. But then by the time I was there for 4 months, I put in my resignation and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And then spent the summer like trying to figure out myself while also trying to get sober and doing so unsuccessfully. And then finally, I went back to work for another association. I found that I really put myself into this really bad pressure cooker situation that I wasn't anticipating. About a year into my tenure, they started going through this massive reorganization. And my boss got fired, my boss's boss got fired, all the C-level got cleaned out. And so my department was operating without any leadership for like 6 or 7 months.
Wow.
And it went full on Lord of the Flies.
Oh God.
I'm not kidding.
I shouldn't laugh, but
I know,
it's
yeah.
like, I'm thinking about just what a shit show, right? You know, like,
Right.
oh my God, this is going
Yeah.
on. And like, if you're looking for stability in any aspect of your life at this point, which I'm imagining, you know, ideally we have that, not there, not happening there in the workplace. Okay. So
Yeah. And then on top of that, so like early 2019, I'd been sober for almost 2 years at that point. But then a family member died by suicide in January. And then we're talking like February, March, April, 3 friends died.
oh my God.
That was really rough, I mean, to say the least. And in the midst of that, like I went into burnout again because I was in this incredibly unsupportive situation at work, experienced a lot of loss really quickly. And then on top of that, one of my coworkers in the Lord of the Flies situation approached me one day. I thought they were being altruistic, asked like, hey, what's going on? Like, you're not pulling your weight. I got very honest in that moment. I'm like, I've had all this death. I'm trying to navigate sobriety, blah, 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 all of these things. I just brain dumped it all. And the response was, Brian, we all have problems. Leave that at home. Just get the work done.
Wow.
And yeah.
Not mastery of empathy at that moment. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So needless to say, I just completely shut down. And this was like February or March of that year. And I was just like secretly waiting for them to just drop the shoe on me and get rid of me. It didn't happen until November. And that whole time I was just like the invisible person at work. And so whenever I was finally let go in December of 2019, my dad had a massive stroke followed by more strokes, was in the hospital all the way up to COVID from December to March 2020. And that was a really big reset for me where I just, you know, as if it wasn't hard enough to try to find a job in DC during November and December.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
ideal timing
Not ideal.
for that. Yeah.
My dad got sick. I took the CAE exam while he was in the hospital.
Which you have your CAE, everybody, but
I do now.
You do now, but that was yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. So
Right.
for me, that was the moment where it's like I just have to not worry about work and
Yeah.
just focus on what's important. And it was almost like getting sober again because then I had to confront like all of these things in my life that led me to that moment. And then we throw a global pandemic on top.
Sure. I mean, I'm like, okay, I don't want to sound too weird, but like, what's going on with him astrologically at this point? Like, we're talking about the sobriety journey, this understanding, really important part of understanding yourself better. But at the same time, you were discovering things like the autism diagnosis, ADHD. We're talking about all of these things that were happening that were traumatic events on their own in your life with losing family, losing friends, health crises. And then you also, we haven't touched on this diagnosis of PTSD, which that was a part of your story as well. And I want to understand better a little bit about how that diagnosis potentially changed your understanding of ways that you'd reacted to things in the past, because to be able to look at that not as failures, but then as signals of something else. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Far before I got the diagnosis, like early 2017, I got into EMDR therapy.
Yeah.
And that was really to get into the sources of trauma that led me to where I was at that moment. So I think it was like 3 months worth of that. It really started to uncover a lot of trauma that from my childhood, from all the way into adulthood, that I had just kind of pushed down. And alcohol is very good at pushing things down. But that wasn't the end of it. So it helped me in that moment. And it helped me think about like what I had experienced all the way up to that and how I could fight against those forces. But then it was 2022, 23, probably 23. I started working with a really great therapist who I've already referenced. We're having a conversation about, I think it was just one of those therapy sessions where I'm just brain dumping about how much work was bothering me that day. And it led into a conversation where I went into the job that I had right before COVID, the one where coworker that said, just get back to work. And I talked about like, I'm still having nightmares about that. And all these other interactions that I had with people, particularly in a work setting, I was just completely unable to trust people. And their response was, you're hitting all the diagnostic check marks here for PTSD. Has anyone ever said that out to you out loud? Because I had therapists before them, obviously. And no, that's never come up. And it's like, you have PTSD, Brian.
Wow.
Yeah. Like everything you're describing and you're not dealing with it. That was yet another bucket of cold water in my face. Like, all right, I think I'm starting to figure myself out, but then let's open another door and let's explore that trauma while we're at it, you know?
Yeah. But it's understanding all of this wiring, how you're wired, had to alleviate some of the shame maybe that you'd felt, because I'm sure like you go through this whole time and you're saying, what's wrong with me? Why am I doing these things? Why have I made the decisions I've made? And when you're able to look at things with this frame of, wow, now I understand there were things that were literally the wiring in my brain. I was trying to manage things the best I could without knowing what was going on. And once you understood how those triggers could be pulled, I'm sure that that had to bring some kind of relief. Talk to me about that. Like once you learned a little bit more about your wiring, how did it change the way that you thought about these experiences and the way that you were maneuvering your life moving forward? Because I'm sure that like with fresh eyes, no longer can you pretend that you don't know. I mean, like there probably is some like, well, now I understand what's driving this behavior. Is that true? I don't know. I'm making assumptions, so I don't know, but
Oh, no, totally. No, very correct assumption. And you hit upon it just a couple minutes ago, because by the time I got to like 2019 into 2020, I thought I was fundamentally broken. There was just something wrong with me, or a lot of things wrong with me that I had no control over. I would say early COVID, I was of the mind that I need to find a new career, and not necessarily career. Like I need to just live like a hermit existence, basically, to just give it all up and find something completely different, because I'm clearly not good at this anymore.
wow. Wow. And that breaks my heart. You know, I know that people listening to this who may not know you, but I know you as a highly intelligent, super capable, super creative human being that you want out there working with you and doing things. And it just breaks my heart to think that at any point you would ever think that you need to hide away somehow.
I should just keep you on retainer to give me compliments. Yeah, I mean, that's where I started. And I would say the autism and the ADHD diagnoses that happened a couple of years after that, the cumulative effect of everything is like, I'm finally at a point in my life where I've forgiven myself for not only all the things that I did wrong leading up to this moment, but also for all the negative perceptions I had of myself. You know, that's the biggest change that I've seen since not only the PTSD, but also ADHD and autism. I know my worth is the biggest message at the end of the day. I know who I am. I know what I care about. And part of that is I just want to help everyone that's around me, but in a way that I am not sacrificing my mental health, in a way that I'm not participating in fawning behavior where I'm just doing it to get you to like me. That's not why.
Right.
It's because I truly care about you, and I want to see you be the best that you are.
And that's also difficult, right? Because while you understand yourself better and you're more capable and you've got a handle on these things, you, Brian, still feel like, well, now I've learned these things and I do want to help others who may be struggling and thinking about, am I broken, or going through something where they just find that they are facing challenges and some of this or all of this is potentially ringing true for them. You're now working on something called 501 Booze Free. And I saw you post about it. You told me about it.
Yes.
I'm lucky. I'm on the inside track a little. And I had gotten to hear about this idea. Love the name. Love the name. Anyone who's not in the association world, so there, you've got your 501c organizations, and it's oftentimes like 501c3, 501c6, and all of this stuff. And so that's where the 501 Booze Free comes from. And so very clever, very interesting. And you posted about on LinkedIn, which is a pretty big deal. You're speaking openly about sobriety and harm reduction in association spaces. It's a really big deal, really brave, and really needed. But it could almost feel risky. I mean, doing this when you are moving in that direction, that is most definitely a direction that is going to draw attention for good or for ill. And you're bringing these conversations into professional leadership. What feels risky about this? How are you handling that? Because we've talked about not just one, but several sideways moments in your journey so far. And here you are, you've got this stability in your life. And I will say this, very consciously, thoughtfully, allowing for this forward motion on this project you care very much about, as stable a way as you can while there's still risk connected to it. So talk to me about what feels the most risky for you and the most necessary about bringing this to the forefront.
This is going to sound very arrogant, but I don't feel any risk.
Ooh.
I don't. Well, if I had to pick out a risk, I would say that I care really deeply about this. So I may get into a situation and I have to protect myself against just throwing all of myself into this project at the expense of my mental health.
Yeah.
But that's in the moment right now, that's the only risk I can think of because my message is already out there. I've been very open about my sobriety for several years now. So I'm at the point in my life where it's like, hey, if you don't want to follow, don't follow. If this affects a hiring decision down the road, or someone decides to dump their stigma on me, you know what? You're not someone I know work with anyway. So
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Before we started talking today, we talked a little bit about therapy, therapists, and stuff like that. I also, several years ago, started working with someone on a regular basis that has helped me deal with a lot of things that I had in my past that I think impacted my behavior. And it's made all the difference. You may have to meet with several people before you find somebody that you can trust enough that you can go into that relationship. But once you find a good match, boy, I'm telling you, it can be like gold. And I was someone that for a long time, I'm like, therapy's not for me. I don't believe in it because I can't trust anybody, da, 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 da. And finding somebody that I could talk to was huge. So I did want to make a note of that here because I know that you feel the same way, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been in therapy for almost 20 years now with several therapists, but I agree with you. But I would add on top of that, you have to be willing to do the work. Once you find the person, you have to be willing to just go to very, very uncomfortable places. Without that, change is not going to happen to your behavior or your outlook on anything, which is quite frankly, for my first 15 years of therapy, I kind of just went through the motions, didn't do the homework, held back a lot. But it was like finally when I let go of that control, that gold that you mentioned, like that all came to the surface.
Yeah. I am so thankful that you are where you are today and that you're out there having these conversations, because in the association industry where there are meetings after meetings, you always hear there's an association for everything. Folks, this is like, it's every industry and profession you can imagine. And so the leadership of these and the knowledge that they have that goes into this can impact an enormous amount of people in many different lines and sectors. And when you begin to think about the impact that you can have by bringing people more awareness and modeling behavior and like the sort of self-awareness that you have about these types of issues, I think that it is not just powerful, but it's something that can save lives. It can transform enormous numbers of people that you may never actually understand the long-term impact down the line, but it's huge. And so thank you for that. That is really incredible and really important.
Agreed. I mean, like I alluded to earlier, like someone has to be willing to just step up and take that risk. I mean, unfortunately, we live in a world where not everyone has the safety or the ability to do that just based on, I mean, let's be honest, on sex, on the color of your skin, on a lot of different things.
All of the stuff. Yeah.
All the stuff that others people, like it's so much more difficult for someone who does not have the privilege that I possess to be able to do that. So it's like, hey, I'll fall on that sword. I'll fall on all the swords you have. Like, bring them all.
I admire it. Always so honest, always so brave and fun. You know, like what I love is that you haven't lost your sense of curiosity. You haven't lost your sense of wonder. And through all of it, you know, you're able to bring humor to a lot of this stuff. Brian, I mean, it's really incredible. And I'm glad that we had this conversation today. I consider you a friend, and I really admire who you are and the work you do.
Well, thank you. And I mean, obviously, I greatly admire you and everything that you've done for the community, and likewise. And, you know, you're a great friend of mine. So hopefully we'll see each other at a conference soon. I realize I haven't been to an ASAE conference for a bit, but hope I can change that soon.
I hope so too. And maybe we can find a way to collaborate in the new year. I feel like there's something with this whole things going sideways, and I'm like trying to figure out new ways to get creative and bring good things to good people. So maybe there's something in that. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out, right?
Yeah, let's talk. Figure it out.
Is there anything else that you want to say right now before I wind it up?
Oh, I know. Perfect opportunity for like just a grand statement. But I think the biggest thing is that along the way, what I've learned, obviously, to forgive myself. But my biggest takeaway from all of this is you don't have to get sober to do this, by the way. But whenever you're in a situation where someone is really frustrating you, you know, perfect example is work. If you feel like, let's use my example, someone's not pulling their weight, is not to immediately think that that person is the problem. And the way that I phrase it is there are very few bad people in the world, but what we have instead are people that are dealing with bad situations. So when you have those moments, don't focus on what they're doing wrong or your perception of who they are in that moment. Think, what is happening behind the scenes that I don't know about? You don't have to say out loud, hey, what's wrong? Tell me about what's going on in your personal life. But just have empathy and patience and work with that person to figure out how they can get beyond the bad circumstances they're dealing with.
It's good advice. For someone listening who feels like you are struggling, you're making it through, people haven't noticed that there's something amiss, but you know that there's something wrong. Maybe you feel like you're barely holding it together. Please just know that you don't have to be the bravest person in the world. You don't have to be the person that has all the answers the next day. You just, I think, have to get really honest with yourself and just believe that you are worthy right now of love.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I do have one final question.
All right.
When you look at your life now, what does being on top of your game actually mean to you?
Wow. And that's interesting because like I feel like I am at the top of my game like finally. For me, it's setting boundaries, being able to say no. For me, it's just recognizing the inherent value of human beings, not as like producers of things. Like obviously we have budgets in our associations, we have to meet those bottom lines. But for me, the best way to have success in your association is to build a culture that supports both failure and success, and to state that clearly, and to really support people and be able to say, hey, listen, we didn't meet the numbers we wanted to, but this is what we learned along the way, and this is how we're going to be better in the future. For me, the future is empathy, which feels weird to say. We're in a very unempathetic time. And this is coming from my own political outlook on life. I'm about as far left as you could possibly get on the spectrum. I make Bernie Sanders look like a Republican in times. But when we have all of these big forces, AI is a good example, and we're seeing billionaires turn into trillionaires. We have to think about how to lead with empathy, particularly in our sector, and how not to give up the ship to oligarchs, basically. To me, that's what leadership looks like in association right now, is to be able to choose who you work with, to do it with empathy, and not to give up the ship to every tech company that's coming out of the woodwork. Think about it strategically.
Love it. All right. I'm signing up for the newsletter, and I'm like all of the things. You are all of the things. And
thank you.
This is great. This is Things Go Sideways. I'm KiKi L'Italian. Thanks for listening.